I'm assuming if you've read the Part 3 in the title, you already have a rough idea of what you're in for. So let's just get on with it. It's at this point in this project that I need to introduce to you a proprietary concept I created for a different project currently under the working title of Felix Venators, or Happy Hunters. The actual details and premise of this story are too wild and complicated to lay out in notable detail in this particular entry, but for the present moment, the concept I mention it in order to bring to your attention is what I've chosen to call the spinning minor knots theorem. In essence, the overwhelming plurality of genetic variation we see in nature amounts to as many aesthetic changes on functionally identical molds. E.g., we've discovered roughly 400,000 species of beetle as of 2025, with estimates placing the actual existing total number anywhere from 1 to 2.1 million, which, according to Google, represents just 40% of all arthropods and approximately 25% of all known animal species. If you've spent any amount of time in the associated spheres of cyberspace, you'll doubtlessly have encountered the "everything always becomes crabs" meme trend. From what I've been able to determine, by which I mean from what I've learned by watching multiple video essays about it, it describes in comedic terms the very real zoological concept of carcinization, which is where non-crab crustaceans co-evolve a crab-like body due to its being so well adapted and versatile to undersea life, with multiple accredited scientific sources describing them as an all-purpose tank. One of the most frequently misunderstood aspects of nature is that evolution isn't a drive towards some lofty ideal of perfection, as no such concept exists outside of the human mind. Everything in nature strives, for want of a better term, for maximum efficiency. It is in the nature of everything, be it living or otherwise, to follow the path of least resistance. From particles to parasites, from insects to instincts, all incentives always trend towards the troughs, never the peaks. This is why the T-Rex has such tiny arms. When the closest modern analog to your bite force is a hydraulic press, you don't really need the grasping meat hooks of lesser carnivores. Your win condition is simply trapping something in your mouth. And the same logic holds for humans, with our outsized intellects being more than capable of negating any disadvantage our mediocre size, speed, strength, stealth, and armor stats may impose upon us. Give us prep time and a group of like-minded peers to bounce ideas off of, there's almost nothing in the universe that can stand against us. But this then begs the question, just how super is superhuman? After all, there's a world of difference between
I am iron. I am wrath. I am doom.
And
rip and tear until it is done.
as we've already covered back in Chapter 1, the true font of transhumanism is not now, nor has it ever been to create an army of elite defenders of national sovereignty. That's just an excuse we men have to use in order to sanctify our natural competitive spirits, since we've grown up in a world where seeking to be stronger, faster, smarter, or in any other way superior to your fellow men is deemed the epitome of evil. But if we default on this faux debt to a society that's long ago abandoned all pretenses at valuing masculinity, if we allow ourselves to bask in the full radiance of the evolutionary spirit of our ancestors, both human and non, we arrive at a pivotal crossroads. Not a fork in the road, but an axiomatic compass rose. Do we follow the path of least resistance, striving for just the bare minimum necessary to accomplish our goals? Or do we go full GEM, God Emperor mode, and look for the absolute pinnacle of what biochemistry itself will allow our bodies and minds to achieve? Well, obviously, if you've read the title, you know which path we're ultimately steering for. But for the sake of academic interest, let us apply some evolutionary principles of our own vis-a-vis, a splash of my own proprietary rebranding of Dr. Seuss's Calculatus Eliminatus, Veritas Reductio, or Truth by Reduction. Now, the fundamental problem with efficiency is that it entirely depends on what exactly you're trying to accomplish. For example, in economics, a business whose goal is to maximize profits is going to view labor contracts as inefficient, as any concessions made towards better pay, product R&D, better working conditions, etc., cuts into their potential earnings and thereby limits their potential profit growth. But on the flip side of that coin, someone whose primary concern is the furtherance of their nation or culture will view the many inequities of business and political interests an impediment towards, if not a stain upon, their ideal of an ideologically pure utopia. When it comes to the nature of life, and by extension the concept of the Ubermensch, the question we need to ask and answer for ourselves is, what is my purpose? By which I do not mean to appeal to some nebulous higher power, nor to the fancy of this or that ideological statute, nor in any way to imply the inglory of seeking a peaceful life of leisure and simple comforts, but to simply posit the straightforward and honest question to you, what is your ultimate goal in life? I.e., if you could choose one thing to be remembered for all time, what would you want that thing to be, and why? That second point is by far and away the more important of the two, but since it is also the more intellectually and emotionally rigorous and less economically, socially, or culturally profitable, also tends to be the more often neglected. If, for example, your goal is truly to become the best version of a soldier humanly possible, you wouldn't need the power to punt cars around like a football, just the ability to go for protracted periods without food, water, or sleep, some minor tweaks to your existing sensory apparatus and nervous system to boost situational awareness and response times, and maybe a mod or two to the hemoglobin to boost oxygen efficiency if you're feeling particularly generous, or just really like walking up and down mountains with twice your own body weight's worth of metal strapped to your back for some reason. Now, obviously, I could, as many others have, write a book of infinite pages on how to forge the ideal life, and every word of it would be every bit as meaningless as all the ink hitherto spilled in attempts to conjure the mythical Superman out of metaphysical wind and dust. But we need to get absolutely straight one singularly important point of Nietzschean philosophy regarding the Ubermensch. You see, as Nietzsche himself well understood, albeit with not a small amount of resentment, the simple hard fact of the matter is that in the game of life, the only power that ever truly matters is the capacity for physical violence. To put it very bluntly, weakness is death in the jungle. If you can't fight, then you're finished. You're either the predator or the prey. If you're not a savage, you'll be a victim. And if what I've seen of the discourse surrounding this or similar topics, namely genetic engineering and robotics, particularly as the latter, pertains to the growth and development of AI, the old truism that humans fear what they don't understand and hate what they can't control has never been more true at any time during the long history of our time on Earth than it is and will be in the coming centuries. My firmest belief, and I don't think it's a particularly contentious view to take, is that for all the sophistic banter about protecting their loved ones from retaliatory strikes by ulteriorly motivated super beings, and though not an invalid concern per se, the true and honest reason most superheroes wear masks is because they know, and those who created them know, that were such beings ever to materialize in our own reality, the result would make the war in heaven look like a regional border skirmish. And so, in keeping with the only natural, strictly materialist philosophy that generated them in the first place, and in all due consideration to the conditions of the world they would be born into and be expected to operate in, the superhero must be mercifully stripped of his halo, adapted for self-preservation, and returned to a semblance of his formerly wild state. To quote the infamous pirate, Captain Jack Sparrow, "The only two rules that matter in this life, boy, are these: what a man can do and what he cannot do. Wisdom and courage and honor and pride are of precisely no use whatsoever to the dead, and power is wasted upon the impotent. Just as a man, and indeed the whole of mankind itself, needed to learn how to fight before he could farm or think or make love, a superman must be that which his predecessors most fear him capable of becoming, a post-human warrior. As such, the majority of this book will be primarily focused on the combative applications and powers, as those are what will form the core of the Ubermensch's identity, just as how the means of arranging might and menace are what originally define a culture, a nation, a country, and all told, a world order."
Ah, you are a perceptive one indeed. In this instance, you are correct. All that strength, that anger, yet it is held in check, restrained by his beliefs, his doubt. Everyone is made up of events in their past, and it forms walls around one's spirit, or breaks such walls down. The mind makes some powerless, and gives strength to others. And know that that is the true lesson of strength, to turn away from strength that is not your own.